This content is for educational purposes and addresses sensitive topics related to capital punishment and justice. Viewer discretion is advised. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell so you never miss an update. Picture yourself confined in a cold, silent cell, fully aware of the precise moment your life will come to an end. Around the globe, death row is home to countless stories, some illustrating justice, others injustice, and many that challenge our core beliefs about humanity. From the medieval guillotine to modern-day lethal injections, the death penalty serves as a chilling reflection of society's moral stance. Are you prepared to uncover the startling truths behind the ultimate punishment? In this video, we delve into 30 extraordinary facts about executions and the death penalty that will leave you astounded. Let's begin with 1. The earliest documented execution. The first recorded execution took place in ancient Egypt around 1500 BCE under Pharaoh Amenhotep II. A nobleman accused of practicing magic, a crime seen as a direct challenge to the pharaoh's divine authority, was sentenced to death. Accounts suggest he was either burned alive or decapitated, underscoring how early societies intertwine religion, crime, and severe punishment to enforce order and protect spiritual beliefs. 2. The oldest surviving death sentence. The trial of Socrates in 399 BCE stands as one of history's most notable examples of capital punishment. Charged with corrupting Athenian youth and impiety, Socrates was sentenced to death in democratic Athens. Offered the chance to escape, he chose instead to adhere to his principles, drinking a cup of hemlock. His death highlighted the imperfections of democratic justice and left a lasting legacy as a symbol of intellectual freedom, sparking centuries of debate about morality and the law. 3. The first execution in the U.S. The first recorded execution in colonial America occurred in 1608 when Captain George Kendall was hanged in Jamestown, Virginia, for allegedly spying for Spain. This event reflected the fragile nature of colonial life, where threats to the settlement's stability were harshly punished. Early capital punishment in America served as a tool of control, used to enforce loyalty and suppress rebellion, showcasing the colonists' determination to establish order in uncertain times. The birth of execution laws. The Code of Hammurabi, created around 1754 BCE in Mesopotamia, introduced one of the earliest formalized death penalty systems. It prescribed execution for 25 offenses, including theft, false accusations, and adultery, following the principle of lex talionis, an eye for an eye. This groundbreaking legal code sought to establish justice, albeit through strict and often disproportionate punishments, to instill fear and uphold social hierarchy. 5. Public executions as spectacle. Public executions were common across Europe and colonial America until the 20th century, often drawing massive crowds. Sites like Tyburn Gallows in England became infamous for hangings conducted in marketplaces. These events served as both entertainment and a stark public deterrent against crime. Despite their brutal nature, they ignited debates on justice and morality, eventually leading to the decline of public executions in favor of private proceedings. 6. Unconventional execution methods. Ancient Rome used the method of damnatio ad bestias, in which criminals were condemned to death by wild animals in public arenas such as the Colosseum. Victims, often unarmed slaves or Christians, were left to face lions and other beasts. These executions reinforced the authority of the Roman Empire while entertaining the public. The savagery of these events has been immortalized in historical texts and modern media, fueling ongoing discussions about justice and humanity. 7. Execution vans. In 2003, China introduced mobile execution vans, a controversial innovation for administering lethal injections. These vehicles enabled executions to be carried out immediately, enhancing efficiency and reducing costs, especially in rural or remote areas. The mobility of the vans eliminated the need to transport inmates to centralized execution facilities. However, the practice has faced significant criticism for its lack of transparency, as executions often occur without public oversight, raising serious human rights concerns and fears of potential abuse. 8. Death row syndrome. Death row syndrome describes the extreme psychological distress endured by prisoners awaiting execution, sometimes for decades. Symptoms include paranoia, severe depression, hallucinations, and suicidal thoughts. A stark example is Japan, where inmates are notified of their execution mere hours beforehand. This prolonged isolation and uncertainty cause immense mental suffering, sparking ethical debates about human rights violations. Advocacy groups like Amnesty International have likened the psychological toll to torture, urging systemic reforms to address these issues. 9. Wrongful executions. The execution of Timothy Evans in 1950 remains a chilling reminder of capital punishment's fallibility. Evans was convicted and hanged for the murders of his wife and daughter, crimes later linked to his neighbor, notorious serial killer John Christie. This grave miscarriage of justice ignited public outrage and played a crucial role in the United Kingdom's decision to abolish the death penalty. Such cases underscore the irreparable harm caused by executing innocent individuals and fuel ongoing debates over judicial reliability and fairness. 10th, first woman executed in colonial America. In 1632, Jane Champion became the first woman executed in colonial America. Convicted of murder, the details surrounding her case remain murky, but her execution highlighted the gendered biases of 17th century justice. Women were often judged harshly, with societal expectations casting them as moral exemplars. Champion's fate reflects a time when women who defied societal norms faced disproportionate punishments, marking a grim period in early American legal history. Let us know in the comments if these 10 facts were new to you. Now moving on to number 11, execution as a deterrent. In 18th century Britain, public executions were intended to punish offenders and deter potential criminals. Hangings took place in bustling marketplaces, drawing vast crowds. Authorities believed these spectacles discouraged crime, yet irony abounded as pickpocketing often occurred during the events. Mounting criticism over the brutality and ineffectiveness of public executions led to their abolition in Britain in 1868, with the practice transitioning to private settings within prison walls. 12. Executions for witchcraft. Between the 16th and 17th centuries, tens of thousands of individuals, primarily women, were executed for alleged witchcraft in Europe and colonial America. Accused of consorting with the devil, victims were often burned at the stake in Europe or hanged in places like Salem, Massachusetts. Fear, superstition, and social scapegoating fueled these brutal purges. The infamous Salem witch trials of 1692 led to 20 executions, later recognized as a profound injustice and a cautionary tale against mass hysteria. 13. Executions of juvenile offenders. Despite international laws prohibiting such practices, some countries, including Iran, have executed individuals for crimes committed as minors. For example, Shayan Saeedpur was executed in 2020 in Iran for an offense committed at 17. These actions violate the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and have drawn widespread condemnation. Nevertheless, juvenile executions persist in certain nations, highlighting the ongoing clash between local legal practices and international human rights standards. 14. Botched executions. Willie Francis, a 17-year-old, became the subject of one of history's most notorious botched executions. Sentenced to death in Louisiana, he survived the electric chair due to a mechanical failure. This traumatic ordeal ignited widespread debates about capital punishment, particularly the potential for cruel and unusual punishment. Despite legal and ethical outcry, the U.S. Supreme Court sanctioned a second execution attempt, which succeeded in 1947. Francis's case highlighted the imperfections of execution methods and remains central to discussions about the death penalty's morality and humanity. 15. The longest death row incarceration. Gary Alvord holds the record for the longest time spent on death row, enduring 39 years in a Florida prison before dying of natural causes in 2013. Convicted of a triple murder in 1974, his prolonged incarceration stemmed from numerous appeals and concerns about his mental health. Alvord's case underscores the inefficiencies of death penalty systems, where delays can stretch into decades, increasing financial costs and raising ethical questions about the emotional toll on inmates and their loved ones. 16. The persistence of stoning. Stoning, one of the oldest and most brutal execution methods, is still legally sanctioned in a few countries, such as Iran and Somalia, for offenses like adultery. Victims, often women, are buried waist-deep and subjected to death by stones hurled at them by a crowd. Although rare, modern cases of stoning continue to draw global condemnation. Human rights organizations denounce the practice as barbaric and inhumane, citing it as evidence of the urgent need for broader reforms to abolish the death penalty worldwide. 17. Gender disparities in capital punishment. Women comprise less than 5% of those executed globally, but gender biases often influence their sentencing. In some regions, societal expectations of women as moral exemplars result in harsher scrutiny for crimes such as infanticide or witchcraft. For instance, in Saudi Arabia, women have faced execution for offenses deemed dishonorable, reflecting entrenched cultural and legal inequalities. These disparities reveal the intersection of gender, morality, and justice, highlighting ongoing issues in the global application of capital punishment. 18. Execution delays. Death row inmates frequently endure decades of uncertainty due to appeals, legal challenges, and systemic delays. In Japan, executions are infamous for their suddenness, with inmates notified only hours before their execution. This practice has been heavily criticized for its severe psychological impact. Similarly, in the United States, inmates often spend over 20 years awaiting execution, sparking debates about whether such prolonged delays amount to cruel and unusual punishment. 19. The first execution by electric chair. In 1890, William Kemmler became the first person to be executed by electric chair in New York. This method was introduced as a supposedly more humane alternative to hanging, but Kemmler's execution was botched, requiring multiple shocks to kill him. The gruesome event provoked widespread debates about the ethics of the electric chair, which nevertheless became a standard method of execution in the U.S. during the 20th century, before being largely replaced by lethal injection. 20. The first execution by lethal injection. Charles Brooks was the first individual executed by lethal injection in Texas in 1982. Promoted as a more humane alternative to methods like hanging, the electric chair, and gas chambers, lethal injection quickly became the primary execution method in the U.S. However, it has faced criticism for frequent botched procedures, often caused by incorrect dosages or poorly trained personnel. Brooks's case marked the beginning of this controversial chapter in capital punishment practices. 21st, execution of pregnant women. Historically, pregnant women sentenced to death were often executed only after childbirth to avoid harming the unborn child. This practice, which dates back to medieval Europe, has largely been abolished under modern human rights laws. For instance, in 2022, Sudan commuted the death sentence of a pregnant woman following significant public outcry, illustrating how evolving ethical standards are compelling nations to abandon such archaic practices. 22. Execution of the mentally ill. Executing mentally ill individuals remains a contentious issue, with international laws prohibiting the practice. Nevertheless, such cases persist in countries like the United States. One notable example is Scott Panetti, a schizophrenic inmate who faced execution despite widespread criticism. Advocates argue that sentencing mentally ill individuals to death violates human rights and overlooks the role of mental illness in criminal behavior. This ongoing issue highlights significant ethical and legal challenges in addressing vulnerable populations within the justice system. 23rd, execution of minors in history. George Stinney Jr., a 14-year-old African-American boy, became the youngest person executed in the United States in 1944. Convicted of murdering 2 white girls in a trial that lasted only 2 hours, the jury deliberated for just 10 minutes before sentencing him to death. Decades later, his conviction was overturned due to insufficient evidence and racial prejudice. Stinney's case underscores the systemic injustices faced by minors and marginalized groups under the death penalty. 24. Most methods of execution in a single country, Iran, stands out for employing various execution methods, such as hanging, stoning, and firing squads, often dictated by the crime committed and local customs. Drug trafficking commonly leads to public hangings, while stoning is reserved for adultery. These methods, rooted in religious laws and strict enforcement, have drawn sharp criticism from human rights organizations worldwide. The diversity and severity of these practices continue to fuel global outrage over Iran's approach to capital punishment. 25th execution for religious crimes. In some nations, religious offenses like blasphemy are punishable by death. Pakistan's strict blasphemy laws have led to high-profile cases, such as Asia Bibi, a Christian woman sentenced to death for allegedly insulting Islam. After years on death row, her conviction was overturned in 2018. Critics argue these laws are often weaponized against minorities or used to settle personal disputes, highlighting the complex interplay between religion and law and the misuse of such regulations to perpetuate injustice. 26. Death by guillotine. The guillotine, introduced during the French Revolution in 1792, became an enduring symbol of swift and efficient execution. During the Reign of Terror, it claimed the lives of over 16,000 individuals, including prominent figures. Remarkably, the guillotine remained France's official execution method until the abolition of the death penalty in 1981. Its extended use underscores the persistence of tradition in justice systems, even as global perspectives on capital punishment evolve toward abolition. 27. Death penalty for LGBTQ individuals. In some countries, homosexuality is punishable by death, including Saudi Arabia and Iran. These laws, often rooted in conservative religious interpretations, have faced strong condemnation from international human rights organizations. Public executions targeting LGBTQ+ individuals reflect deep-seated discrimination and the use of capital punishment as a tool to enforce restrictive societal norms. Global campaigns advocating for equality and the decriminalization of same-sex relationships continue to challenge these oppressive practices. 28. Last public execution in the U.S. The last public execution in the United States occurred in 1936, when Rainey Bethea was hanged in Owensboro, Kentucky. The event attracted over 20,000 spectators and devolved into a chaotic spectacle, prompting widespread public outcry. This incident led to the cessation of public executions in favor of private ones conducted within prison facilities. Bethea's case highlighted societal unease, with the death penalty being treated as entertainment and its implications for public decency and justice. 29th. Death penalty abolition trends. Since the late 20th century, more than 70% of the world's nations have abolished the death penalty in law or practice. For instance, Rwanda ended capital punishment to foster reconciliation after its history of genocide, while countries like Canada abolished it following cases of wrongful conviction that cast doubt on the system's fairness. These shifts reflect a global movement toward prioritizing rehabilitation over retribution, driven by evolving human rights standards and changing public attitudes. 30. Decline in U.S. executions. The number of executions in the United States has dropped dramatically since the 1990s, reflecting changing public opinion, legal challenges, and the increasing use of life without parole as an alternative sentence. In 1999, 98 executions were carried out, compared to just 18 in 2022. Growing awareness of wrongful convictions and concerns over racial disparities in sentencing have further fueled this decline, signaling a significant shift away from capital punishment within the American justice system. The stories from death row are as haunting as they are thought-provoking, prompting profound questions about justice, morality, and humanity. If you believe there are facts that should have been included in this list, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know in the comments. If this journey into the complexities of capital punishment captivated you, don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts. For more deep dives into intriguing and thought-provoking topics, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Let's continue exploring the stories that shape our world together.